We're so excited to have you here today. The topic today is definitely a hot one, and one that has crossed my mind as a competitor, and I'm pretty sure if you're a competitor or even a spectator, it's definitely crossed your mind as well. Before we get into that, though, I do want to just welcome you to Reining and really the transition and the evolution of what we're doing. And as most of you previously know, Reining was developed, I created it as a website to connect both buyers and sellers together of high quality reining horses. Well, now times have changed. And what we need more of is sharing of information and knowledge and breaking down those old barriers of being able to learn from each other. And that's what we're doing right now through these lives that we're going to have and our subscription that's going to be coming out in the near future. There is going to be more information on that to come. Definitely stay tuned on our social media platforms, both YouTube as well as Instagram. Follow our stories, and might as well follow myself. I'm Shelly Ryan and Chelsea. We kind of all share it there because you never know what the algorithm is going to show. So again, we are so excited to have you here. Before we jump into today's topic, I just got to tell you, this is a special one. And I'm actually going to let Miss Chelsea Sutton introduce our very special guest, Brian, here. And then we'll jump right into this very hot topic.
Thanks for having me, Shelly.
Yep.
I am honored to be here today. My name is Chelsea. Many of you guys know me, and many of you may not. I'm the CEO of Consultment Agency. I'm a co-host here at Reining and honored to be introducing Brian Digert. Brian's originally from Buffalo, New York, and grew up around animals, originally pursuing a veterinarian degree in the footsteps of his father. After many years on the wait list, Brian got started under Dick Peepers as a reining horse trainer. In his early career, Brian trained reining horses and held top 5 titles. He exhibited reining alongside Olympic medalist Lyndon Gray at the '96 Olympics to pursue and elevate the sport of reining on an international stage. After selling his farm in western New York, Brian was hired to open the Bob Martin Agricultural Center in Williamston, North Carolina. During his tenure as the facility manager, he attracted, created, and ran some of the best reining shows. As many of you guys know, the late Carolina Classic Derby. In 2007, Brian was recruited to take over Westworld of Scottsdale, where he expanded its use, added $50 million in capital improvements, and attracted premier working Western shows, recently earning the 2020 Best Facility Award from the league. As you can see, Brian has experience in many facets of the industry. Today, I want to tap into his knowledge as a judge. Brian got his judge's card in one of the first judges' schools, February of 1985 in Catasauqua, Pennsylvania. Brian spent his career studying the philosophies and principles of the judges system luminaries such as John Snoblin, and worked with modern pioneers to advance the judges system. For the judges that are joining us live today, many of you were taught by Brian in a judges seminar or may be mentored by him through the judges monitoring program at the NRHA majors. Brian's held judging credentials from the FEI all the way down, USEF, NRHA, AQHA, APHA, and more. This, of course, is just a highlight of Brian's resume, although you can see Brian's background is extensive. My favorite title for him is Dad. Not only has he instilled character and life lessons in me, my father's dedication to studying and applying the rules of judging has created a passion in my life for understanding how reining particularly can impact and bring horses to the lives of many. I'm honored to be co-hosting this chat with Shelly. Many of you guys will be commenting in and asking questions, for which I will be moderating and watching for. In the future, I also want to mention that Brian is going to be joining us as a panelist and a co-host and moderator for many of our topics on judging and similar topics here at Reining. On that note, I also want to remind everyone that Brian is here on his own accord. His opinions are his own and represent his experience and his knowledge to date.
Thanks for sticking with us. If you were on our previous intros, we appreciate it. I hope that you listened to it, because Chelsea shared just a wealth of information and background on Brian. And now let's dive into it. So today we're here to answer that question. Why is there a spread in a multiple judging system? You know, and I think just as relevant as you can be at the NRBC, watching the open finals, I mean, wow, what an open finals. But you would see those 5 scores come up there, and I mean, as just a human, right? We got to look at it and maybe question, be like, why is there such a spread? And so that's what we're here to discuss today. Before we do that, because we have someone with such a depth of knowledge on the judging system, dating back all the way to 1985, maybe could you just, Brian, start out giving us a little bit of background about how the judging system came to be for NRHA?
Sure, and thanks for having me today. It's actually quite simple. Before 1985, the sport of reining was like a lot of the other stock horse sports inside the American Quarter Horse Association, and it was a numerical system, but it was very loose, and it was just based upon what your impression was, and you had to provide a number. It was between 60 and 80, and you provided a number at the end of the run. And that's why when reining was first being getting active, the sliding stopped because you do more slides than you do anything else in the skills of reining, and it was always at the end of the pattern. The horses that slid better generally were higher in the competition list, and so all of that is why the system was created. Now, the rest of the work, when the system was created in 1985, it was actually, in my opinion, way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
You're talking about a handful of guys, Peepers, Snowblin. There was many in those days that put their brains together. Bill Horn, Bob Loomis, those founders that were all part of it, because they were always thinking on how to make reining better. So, and those were in the early days of the NRHA as well. So the fraternity was still part of the Congress in those days. And so the creation of the system was actually set out to it really was set out to do a couple simple things, which was to make the entire run of reining relatively equal from the beginning to the end, and put a more objective analysis into it as opposed to an opinionated subjective analysis, which is what we were always subject to, because that's what the judges would do in those days. So that's what precipitated the creation of the system as we know it, and then it's continued to try and evolve and come along with the sport.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with you as far as, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but just that it was so ahead of its time. I mean, I've heard numerous people in other equestrian sports that look to reining and they're like, I love this system,
right.
And how it is. It's the most fair way to compete.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's, yes, the true testament to its success and the fact that it was ahead of its time was in 1985. But if you look at the entire industry now, and all of the disciplines are using some portion of what the NRHA judges system created. So
yeah.
Yes. And what it really does is breaks it into two simple parts. There's an objective analysis that you don't really have to think about, and that's about penalty infractions. It's about whether a penalty does or doesn't occur. Those are the basic rules of how you play the game. The subjective analysis is the maneuver evaluation. And so what it did was not make any one maneuver more weighted than another.
Like more valuable,
right.
Yeah.
All your patterns are in either 7 maneuvers or 8 maneuvers. So the only thing that differs is pattern 9 or 10 that has 8 maneuvers, as opposed to pattern 6 and 8 that has 7 maneuvers. But still, all the entries in that class are on the same playing field. So the subjective analysis is really, and I would say again, the system minimized subjective analysis, because the NRHA and the standard of the industry actually takes subjective analysis, which is the maneuver evaluation, and puts it into 3 simple categories. What is correct? And correct is moving all the time, year after year. If you look at correct now and you went back to the year 2000, which was yesterday to me, those are 2 very different correct maneuvers.
Yeah.
And that's because the industry is always moving forward. But so you have correct, and then you have better than correct, which is credit earning, and you have less than correct, which is you have some other faults, and that's resistance, temporary out of control, and those components. So it's really, from a judge's standpoint, it's finding itself in one of those 3 categories, and then a judge has to put all of his work into his or her work into the final decision in one of those 3 big subjective categories, which is about how good. When you talk about the NRBC finals, your top 35, 40 horses were all within 4 or 5 points. Well, and you're talking about, that's all 220 and a better. Those are 73 and a halfs and better runs. So we're now talking about how good something is. We can all have 10,000 Rainers can have that debate and you'll never come out to the end.
Yep.
But those are the great ones because it's about how good something is. So again, what's supposed to be happening is the analysis of how good something is or what the faults were. And if it's neither one of those two, then it's correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Did you have anything to join in right now? Any questions so
No,
far?
so far
Okay.
we're good, although I do want to remind the audience that we are taking questions. So, yeah, we're going to talk about some good stuff, but if you guys have specific questions about spread scores and, especially from a judge's perspective.
Yeah. Here's your opportunity, right? So getting into that spread scores, the first thing I want to talk about is that 5-judge system, right? Like we did see at the NRBC, and we do see at all of our large events. Let's talk about why that was set in place, and then let's talk about the view of the chairs, the judge, and how that is different, maybe left wall versus right wall.
Sure. Well, multiple judge system was always around in Reining, even pre-85. Would they use multiple judges? Yes. And all of equine sports, all of sports uses multiple judges. Why? More brains is always better than one.
Absolutely.
More views, more decisions is always better than a soul.
Yeah.
So why does Reining use a multiple judge system? That's one, so that you have multiple views. What is supposed to happen in the sport of reining? The officiating system is supposed to give a numerical mark that is a reflection of what the exhibitor performed. That is the ultimate end goal.
Gotcha.
Now the rest of it is how well did that happen? And that's where all of us have all of our views and opinions and standpoints and analysis of what all of that means. And when we're an exhibitor, we have an even stronger opinion than when we're a spectator, but we still all have
For
those.
sure.
And so the multiple judge system was truly so that I always said this, there is no hiding in the sport of reining. And that is true when you use a 5-judge system because you have 5 officials, highly trained, highly experienced, very capable, and they have the entire 360 degrees of that arena. So from the time that exhibitor enters the arena, which is time they're being judged, till the end of the last maneuver, it's going to be seen. Now comes the rest of it, and how do you deal with all of that? And so 5 judges gives you a full 360-degree viewpoint, and you're not going to miss it. Somebody's going to catch it.
And that includes like the review system now, right?
Correct.
So
And that's
a
why
part of
reviews
it.
keep bringing itself down into the rules because that's what we all want. We want the most accurate analysis, the most accurate numerical reflection of what the exhibitor did. So it's not a law of average and it's not a law of, well, he blinked or he sneezed or whatever that was. The beauty with 5 is you get it all. The downside to 5 is it costs more as far as from a show production. And so why do we see
Absolutely.
it? We see it at the top end of our sport, but it's not used, it's 2 and 3 judges in most average reignings now.
Most of the affiliate kind of local ratings.
Right.
with
And
the large
so they're still using a portion, which is better than 1, but they're not getting the full advantage to a 5, and that's, for the most part, it's a cost factor.
Gotcha. Now, go ahead.
We do have a question that's already come in.
Great.
Can you talk about, as a judge, your thoughts on horses gaping their mouth and how that plays into a judge's decision?
Well, sure. That's in maneuver evaluation, and it's a horse gaping its mouth is showing a form of resistance. Might be momentary, it might be a split second, but that's a temporary lack of control. That's what it is according to our rule book. My job as a judge is to analyze that, and now I have more work, which is how severe. Because, the little bit of wait a second versus no, not now, those are 2 different communications from a horse to a rider. So, and some horses, and you got to be careful because we're using words to try and have a conversation. So gapping its mouth would be a common term to a horse being resistant to the bit. So but that's not necessarily the same as a horse being tight in its chin when it's being demanded on. Or some horses, when they're dialed right up to the top, some horses will actually gap their lips a little bit. So that's not a bad thing. Because if they're under full control and doing really hard stuff and really dynamic, that's good. You have
It's just
to
expression of the horse.
correct, correct, which is no different than you and me. But a horse gapping his mouth, when the rider goes to the bridle and the horse gaps his mouth first, he's just saying, wait a minute. And that's a temporary lack of control or a form of resistance. We have to analyze that. Now we got to put it into the rest of the thing. What you don't get to understand when you see my score on maneuver is that all that work went in there.
And we're going to get to that, and I think we're going to spend a lot of time on that when it comes to the complexity of the maneuver and judging that. Now, before we jump into that, and this might even fall into that question a little bit with the gapping, is left versus right wall for the judges' chairs, because if someone comes through center and maybe lifts up and the horse gaps, well, the two judges on the back wall aren't going to see that.
Correct. There's a distinct difference between the right wall and the left wall. All reining patterns are set so that they are set to the left wall. That's by rule. That's for the exhibitor's benefit, all the rest of that stuff. And habitually, we have predominantly leaned on the left wall. And why? Because that's the front. So you are seeing full expression of a horse. You're seeing the full expression and all of the communication things that are happening. On the right wall, you don't see all of that. So there is a distinct difference between the front view and the back view. One's not better or worse than the other. They're distinctly different. What happens when we use a 5-judge system? High and low gets thrown out. Why? So there's no undue influence. And when we created the system in '85, the reason we tossed out high and low is because the middle average was the best representation of the competition of what the exhibitor showed.
Yeah.
We knew that then, and that's why we did that. There's more to that conversation on in today's time. Is the 3 and the 3 average the best, as opposed to using 5 and putting them all together? But that's another conversation.
That's another conversation. But this judging topic, I mean, we're just touching on one little piece of judging today, guys. So we have so much more that we're going to discuss on this. But I thought that this one was a really good and relevant topic to discuss right now. So, I love the distinction between the left and right wall. I, as an exhibitor, hadn't always thought about that. And you had mentioned before in a previous conversation, just even the expression of the horse and the rider from the front view to the back view. And that's where, you can get differences in maneuvers, right? Maybe they're both good, but maybe it's a 0 to a +1/2 under different judges depending on different seats, or 0 to +1, or what have you.
Yes and yes. As a general trend, the right wall will generally be a little bit lower on its mark than the left wall judges, and that's because of the viewpoint. Now, you also have judges that once you experience those 5 different chair placements in an arena, people get preferences. Personally,
Judges get preferences.
Judges, sure. So they just do, and it's like the left lane, right lane, middle lane, and the highway, whatever that is. Similar things. You just get a preference. I personally used to like the 5th chair.
You would like the 5th chair.
So, what can I
Watch
tell you?
it.
Why would you like the 5th chair?
It's just, I can't answer the exact why. I just know that I used to like it. And since when you get the honor of going to judge one of the majors and they'd go through that whole chair allocation stuff, and again, you don't want to put a judge in something they don't like. So generally you'd have that simple conversation. So I'd always be first to pipe up because I'll take the right wall any day. Yeah. And I love the 5th chair. I just did. So it's okay.
I love that.
Again, in my view, the hardest is the 2nd chair. It's dead center.
Yeah.
Especially when the depth of competition gets up, because 1, 3, 4, and 5 are off center line.
Yep.
So you have a slight angle, which then made change the leads in the middle and all that work that you have to do, because you have a little bit of angle and you see all 4 legs clear as a bell. On dead center line, because they'll come right at you and you'll miss back feet and it's hard. So now a lot of people really like that spot. I'm just telling you what was mine over the years. The 5th chair was my favorite.
I love it. I think that would be just like a fun roundtable discussion.
Which chair?
over like with a group of judges, like who likes what chair and why and all that. Okay, let's move on to the term that we've touched on once, but complex, and how a maneuver can turn into a now complex maneuver for you to judge.
Well, the original topic is why do spreads happen in the sport of reining? And the simple answer is because the decision-making process, the bulk of reining, is not easy decisions. They are complex decisions. You have 7 or 8 maneuvers broken up, and you have 2 major chores with every one of those steps. You have to first find whether a penalty does or doesn't occur. My job, I have to see it. And I don't have to think about it, but I have to identify it. And then the number goes with it because it's all pre-formed. Then comes the really hard work, which is the never-ending complex decision-making process per maneuver. And I would tell you, this is my view and my opinion, circles are probably one of the harder ones. Why? They take longer. They have a lot more complexity to the entire process, including quality of motion. You know, when you talk balance, all of those things, a horse that gaps his mouth for a split second when the rider asks it to slow down, you have to take all of that. You see it all and you're dealing with it all, but you have to go through a mental process because you only have 7 choices.
Yep.
0 plus half plus 1 plus 1.5 or minus half minus 1 minus 1.5. That's what you got to do.
Yep.
And not only do you have to do it for this maneuver, but I got to do it for 8,000 maneuvers in the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and my job and what do we all want is consistency from our judges. So we want them to be consistent from first horse to last horse, from first class to last class.
Yep.
So that's a very complex and continual demand on how do you make those decisions to the best that you can per maneuver. And I would say that the circles are one because of the length of time and the amount of things that happen out there in circles. And then I would say that the rollbacks, the approach, stop, and rollback is the other one that is complex. And why? Because no one part of that maneuver, Steve Ross talks on the commentary on our major events a lot about every maneuver has a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's true. But are they all equally weighted? No, it's not. And then I'm going to throw some more in there. You got degree of difficulty. Well, you have to be a horseman in order to be able to sort through how difficult something is or isn't. We'll go back to the NRBC finals. You're talking about 35 horses that were high degree of difficulties. And those judges and you're talking about 35 horses now within 5 points of each other.
Yeah.
All marking 73 and a half and better. Well, that's tough stuff. That's hard work.
That's super tough stuff. And it's again like back to back to back. It's not like you get to think about the complexity of that one maneuver and make a decision. You have to make a decision fast because you got to already be on and focus on the next maneuver.
You got to move on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now let's
So that's a complex decision.
And going further on that, about, I believe the way that you talked about the top of a 0 and the bottom of a 0 and how there's like a lot of span in that. Could you maybe explain that a little bit deeper?
Sure.
And we're talking about a specific per maneuver, not like a 0 overall score.
No.
Like a
0 on our maneuver score is that means correct.
Correct.
It means correct. And we all get when you got to be careful when you talk about it because if you say 0, then some people are referring to a DSQ.
Yeah, no.
0 is maneuver score of correct. That means there is no credit and there is no fault. That's correct. Now, who defines correct? Basically, the industry itself. And I made reference to this when we started because correct is constantly evolving. It's always moving. If you looked at a correct maneuver, I don't care if you took the weekend reining today or the NRBC finals, the bulk of correct maneuvers and looked backwards 5 years, those are advanced. That's because our entire industry is always moving. Quality of horses, all the rest of that stuff. Yeah. So correct is that piece. And what correct really is that it's not one of the other two. It's not earning credit, and it's also not displaying fault. So that is a fundamentally correct display of this given maneuver. Now comes the rest of the story. And we talk about it, we used to talk about it, the bubble. It's the bubble of zero. And the point is, the top side of zero and the bottom side of the zero are distinctly different. And you and I and everybody else can see it, and we can talk about it, and we can illustrate it. But when it comes out on our scorecard, it's the same. It's a zero.
And it feels the same to the exhibitor.
Yep.
Correct. Correct. And Steve and Pete were talking about it on the live streaming at the NRBC, and the point was, it's the standard. The standard's a 70 today, and a 75 years ago, and a 70 10 years ago, and a 70 20 years ago. Our 70s today would have been 72s and 73s 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just because everything's kind of advancing itself and moving forward. But the zero, the correct maneuver score, is probably one of the bigger, I don't know if the right word is weakness. It's a catch-all in our officiating. I know as a judge, it was a last resort for me as a person. When I was judging, I was trying not to use zero. Because I was trying to find, when I judged, I'm trying to find credit. Why? Because the fault is easy. It's going to come to me. I don't have to look for it. I don't have to hunt it. The penalties are also easy.
Yep.
I just have to see them. So I can't blink at the wrong time. I can't tip my head down at the wrong time. I got to watch the sun in an outdoor arena, and I used to use my hat a lot. So that I could be seeing the key things at the key times, because the penalties, I just had to see them. They're automatic. I wasn't looking for fault. Fault will jump at me. I was always looking for credit. And it's when there wasn't any credit, then I only had one default, which is zero, which is correct. And there I'd sit. That was a learned thing that I had to learn how to do over the years. But this is my view. The problem is correct. The maneuver score of zero is too big. So when I give you as an exhibitor a zero, you could have been right on the verge of getting a plus
getting
half.
a half. Yeah.
But for something, I didn't. And so you get a zero, which is mathematically and numerically in your scorecard. The same thing's true on the other side. The person that was right on the cusp of getting a minus half, but for whatever reason, no, and you give it a zero, those two are now in the same spot, which would lead to, how can a maneuver have a plus half and a minus half at the same time? That's why.
And that I think is such an important piece of knowledge and experience. And I never even thought about that before, is just how big that zero is, and meaning like you could be right on the cusp of that half, but for whatever reason, I just didn't earn it, And I think that when we go look at judges' cards, it's hard, and it's, very black and white. We don't see all these complex decisions that are being made as you guys are judging. We just simply see our score.
Right.
And then we'll just see, we'll compare all the scores, and we'll be like, oh, well, this guy got me, this guy didn't, this guy gave it to me, this guy didn't, or girl, or what have you. And it's like taking a moment and thinking about how hard and complex it is it's really opened my eyes to the judging.
Well, Ann, can I jump in here quick? We've got a question that I want to share in a second. But when you think about that at a per maneuver level, whether that's at the 0 to plus half or 0 to minus half, or even in other cases, a plus half to a plus 1, and how one judge could see that plus half being at the top of that plus half, where another judge gives it to you at the plus 1. When you do that on 2 or 3 maneuvers, you can now at the end of the score be a point or point and a half
Or
different,
two.
or 2 points different.
2 maneuvers on a difference of, should multiple judges be within about a half a point, depending on any given maneuver? Basically, yes. But the weakness is, or the difficulty, or the complexity is, the top and bottom of zero. Because now all of a sudden the plus half, you're really within it, but the plus half and the minus half, now that's a point. You do that 2 or 3 maneuvers, you're now 2 to 3 points. And now you have your 69 and your 71 and a half, and the exhibitor is confused.
Exactly. It's that adds up cumulative, right, over the course of the 7 or 8 maneuvers.
Correct.
And that's where you get the spread.
And which judge is correct, the 69 or the 71?
It's neither. I shouldn't say it that fast. Can a given judge in a multiple judge system be more correct than the other? Yes, but I would tell you our system says no, because we put the scores together. So even if you use a two-judge system, it's not my score and your score. It's not which one of us was right. Our score is what's right, because that's what they put us here for.
And they both
So when
count,
you put us together and you got the 140 and a half, I marked you a 69 and you marked it a 71 and a half, the combined score is a 140 and a half, the right score is a 140 and a half. Period.
And as an exhibitor, looking at, does that sting anybody?
I was like, does anybody like, I mean, I'm just, as an exhibitor, taking that in for a minute. I was like,
well, and as an exhibitor, because they should go look at their scorecards.
Yes.
Right?
oh yeah.
Yes.
So explain,
You should do two things as an exhibitor. Get your scorecards from every reining you go to, and get as many of your videos as you can. And over time, what you'll find in all of that are common denominators. It's not any one moment. It's not any one maneuver. If you had a pattern and you had three judges and two of them marked you a +1 and one of them marked you a 0 on that maneuver, you're going to have this short-term debate on that thing. But if you did that 6 shows in a row, you now have a common denominator on what your skills, your horse, your exhibition, your showmanship are. Because the bulk of those judges over that are telling you that you're in the plus column. You're on the credit earning. Now you're doing something in there that is keeping a minority of those officials that have marked you on a more conservative. So now your job is figure it out.
get out
Find
of the
it.
conservative.
And don't let them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As an exhibitor, you don't want that judge to think negative. You want him. I never ran across a judge that wasn't trying to do their best work, and they all are trying. They want it. Marking 73s and 74s and 75s are fun. They're fun from a judge. It just is. That's where you want to be. So we want exhibitors to be showing that.
Well, that goes back to what you just said. You're hunting for the opportunity to earn, to give a credit earning score. So, I mean, I can see where that is fun. And, I just got to, reflect on that for a second, because I think that we all go in there and we think, oh, if I could just get a 70, or, oh, if I could just get a 73, I could win. It's not about the score. It's give the judge the opportunity to find those credit earning maneuvers and each one, and it will add up cumulative. I know as non-pros, we see these big scores sometimes and we're like, oh, if I could only do that. That's
You can.
the thing is we can. And, I just think back just the evolution and just what I've learned and what I'm even learning now. God. It's really amazing, but I think it's taking a step back and looking at this from a different perspective. Like, why is the spread there? Because a lot of times we can look at our spread and be like, what the hell? Like, this is ridiculous. These judges don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah.
That judge doesn't,
or
that one.
Yeah,
right?
that guy. Yeah, or girl or whatever. But and I think you really got to, your advice is really important.
So that's true as a casual reflex. What should we all do as reiners? Be a little bit more sophisticated in the rest of the knowledge. Now here comes. You'll never be able to climb. All you get is a video and my scorecard. Can you sort that out for the most part? Yes, you can. Probably to 99.9%. Whatever that fine, complex decision that made me do whatever on that 8 maneuvers, will you ever find that specific? Probably not. But you don't need to. That fraction of what that is doesn't matter, because the rest of there is no hiding and reining. So those scorecards are going to tell you very good info. All you have to understand, when you see point spreads, it's because the run had complexities in it, or it was hard. It made it hard for the judge to make their maneuver evaluation. Now that's the answer.
Yep.
What's that mean? I need to sit down with the video and some friends and a couple coaches.
It's a tool,
and
right?
Find it.
I mean, the scorecards in the
Will you
video,
find
it's a
it?
tool.
Yes, yes.
And to be able to go through it. And I think it's just something that, we all have those knee-jerk reactions, right? Either watching it or being the exhibitor. And I think it's taking the step back, rewinding and looking at the score and going through each maneuver and looking at the complexities. And did I give the opportunity for the judge to mark me?
Correct.
You know?
Complex decisions, the basic answer to
deal.
why there are spreads in scores. The decisions are hard. And so the harder the exhibitor makes that decision-making process on the judge, the more that's going to obviously push.
Create more spreads.
Because a
Yeah.
half-point difference on 3 or 4 maneuvers is a 2 to 2.5 point spread on a run. So the difference between a 72 and a 74.5, there it is. There is no right and wrong. That's the bottom line. That's one. 2 is the amount of penalties that show up and when penalties show up. Penalties may influence maneuver evaluation, sometimes not. The sometimes not is the obvious one. That's the overspin and the spin.
Yeah.
You can have a +1.5 spin and have a half-point penalty, and they did not influence each other, period. The half-point penalty is probably because he just did a 1.5 spin, and it was that. There was so much.
Yeah.
You got so much momentum and stuff going on, so okay, fine. That's the obvious one. The other ones can a lot. A freeze and a rollback absolutely will influence it. So not only are you getting a 2-point freeze and a penalty, but you got a maneuver coming down too. So those things are happening side by side. Then you're going to have other ones. The 1-point delayed change of lead across the middle for one stride. And the point is, you get, if you're in a 3-judge system, 1 judge sees it, 2 judge don't, or vice versa. Here's the real one. 2 judges on the ends see it because they got an angle. 1 judge on dead center can't even see that back foot.
Yeah.
Couldn't even see it for that one stride. So you got 2 that take a half-point penalty, 1 doesn't. You get to the end of the run, they got a 1.5 difference on the scores. There you go.
There you are. Yeah. That's really, I mean, we're here to answer that question. Like, why is there a spread in a multiple judge system? And I think we're really getting down into it. And the last, I mean, as far as the complexity, I really love that part of the conversation and your perspective, what you're thinking. It has really opened my eyes. I hope it's opened our community's eyes too. Just looking into that. Now, the third topic on kind of why the spreads happen that we talked about was human error. Let's talk about that. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Sure. You want me to make 8,000 decisions across 12 or 13 or 14 hours, and then you want me to do it absolutely excellent with no errors. That's what you're expecting out of me as a judge.
And I want you to
And
sit in
then
a hard
you want
chair.
me to do it, and then, well, now you want me to do it with my knees close to my chin. I'm 6 feet tall. That hurts. So yes, if you put me in one of those falling apart, folding director's chairs that don't have any support, that's another problem. And then you want me to do it for 4 or 5 days in a row.
Or 8 or 9.
Right.
10.
That's what you're asking out of our officiating system.
Yep.
Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not.
No.
What do we really want? If we use NRHA standard, we want excellence. Can we ask our officiating system to perform at that excellent level? I'd say no.
Really?
Yeah.
No. Can it fire very good? And I'd say it probably. It's been a while. When I used to be on the judges committee, I used to do a lot of analytics, and I looked across the entire industry. So, but that's now over 10 years old. So I don't know
But give some
in
insights
current
on that.
stats.
Like, what did you find then?
Well, if you go back 10 years, 80% of reining was shown between 3 maneuvers, minus half and plus half. All reining. You got to take 400 reinings across the country and do all that kind of stuff. And so the average reining, that's where it is.
Yep.
When we look at the NRBC, those are very special major events, and they're the best of the industry. They're not normal reinings. And are they seeing the whole gamut? Yes.
Yeah,
You know, you had how many? Anyways, a lot of horses, a lot of entries, all the rest of that stuff. But the point to the story is human error. Yes. And to be
It can
honest
happen
with you,
in anything, though. It's not just like
course.
to pick on reining or to pick on. I mean, this is judging gymnastics. This is judging swimming. This is
Correct.
judging, high school football. It can happen. It is human error.
correct. Humans are imperfect animals. So yes, they're going to make mistakes. What are we trying to do? Minimize those.
Yep.
Now comes, how do we set our system up for exhibitors so that the officiating can perform at that same level when the depth of competition is at highest demand? And as an industry, we're still playing with that.
We're still figuring
in
that
all
out.
of that. You know, the last time I did the fraternity, and Gary Carpenter, the commissioner, actually called me afterwards and asked, because the schedule was different, and so the layout was different. And it was one of the best ones I'd ever experienced in 30-some years. And I told him that. And it was from a judge's point of view.
Yeah.
Because I was rested, I was fresh, and the other side was, because of the way they assigned us to judging horses, I judged 2 different sections of non-pro and open, and then I did the non-pro finals. But I had 0 preconceived notions. Why? Because I couldn't remember any of the non-pro horses. 1, I didn't know who went to the finals. 2, I couldn't remember them from the go-round that I saw a piece of. So it was the clean, I could sit there with the cleanest mind that I could have, making the best subjective analysis. It was some of the better work I ever did. And
It's like exciting too. That
Yes.
like created excitement for you as a judge.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to think about this. What will your mind do when you have a preconceived expectation of what's going to happen?
Fulfill it.
Judgments.
It'll try.
Yeah.
It will try. Well, now, because your question is errors. Do humans make errors? Yes, of course it is. That's a very complex conversation because you're talking about human behavior and psychology. And now and how well do we could sit here and talk about horses and riders and Reinings and the 1982 fraternity finals and the NRBC. We could talk about all of those, and we could do it in first person. But what all of that does, if you now have to turn around next week and step into that arena, and you might know first person, because you've seen it, you've judged it, you've done something before, you have an expectation of what that's, and that's a dangerous place for a judge to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You know, where are we at right now, Chelsea, on time? I don't even know.
We're at 5 o'clock, so
We're pushing it.
we're pushing it. We do have a question come in, and you might want to repeat this. This is more specifically about a judging topic rather than the spread. But can you talk about when a horse picks his foot up in the stop?
Sure.
I'm just going to repeat that real quick before you answer, Brian. So we did have a question come in, and just talking about when a horse goes to stop and they pick up one of their hind feet in the middle of that stop.
It's a temporary out of control. That's the answer. Now you've got the rest of the complex decision. How bad? How much? Did it affect? Did it not? Picking it up at the beginning is not as severe as picking it up in the middle at all. Picking it up in the middle, a horse is readjusting its balance.
Yeah.
And there's a survival in there. I mean, you got safety and all the rest of that, and we're not a crash and burn sport. That's a good thing.
Yes.
But you have to understand what's going on, and what are we expecting? What's a correct sliding stop? When those hind feet go to the ground, they stay committed to the ground and they slide forward to the motion stops. And we're expecting the front feet to maintain some cadence, and that's where the break in the front feet. That's what we're expecting, and it's supposed to be straight, not 45 degrees off, not an eighth off, not any of that stuff.
Yep.
And it's not one-footed; it's both back feet, so they're supposed to go to the ground. Well, a horse depends on the acceleration, but if you study enough of them, when a horse first assumes a position, a lot of horses will do this. And that's their stride going from long to getting up underneath their body and then committing to the ground. That is not bad. That's a horse getting in position and going to the slide. Once that horse is in position and assuming that slide, now when that foot comes up, that's because he's got to do it to stay up. Well, it's a temporary lack of control, out of balance.
Very good. Very good. I mean, not very good, but makes sense.
Happens all of us.
It does. I mean,
It's okay.
Hope that helps, Don. I wonder if you're asking for yourself or for a friend, right?
but that's what we're here for. You know, and I just,
Well, and that's another one too. Sorry to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
If you're on one side of the wall of that stop versus the other side of the wall, that
You didn't see it.
Well, that could take you from, you tell me, a 0 to the wall that saw the foot plus half to the wall that didn't, or maybe a 0 to a +1? Would you go that far?
Well, sure. It depends on the rest of it.
Sure.
Yeah, again, when you have the conceptual conversations, they're hard because you really need good examples. But it doesn't, regardless of what, if the stop is a stop and hesitate, you have from the end of the other maneuver a run around and an approach. And the approach is very important to the stop. Directly proportionate. There is no directly.
It's
The
beginning,
quality-
middle, and end of the
yes,
whole maneuver,
of the whole
right?
maneuver.
Yeah.
But when that horse comes, it doesn't, whether you're going up and down the middle or up the sides, when the rider asks that horse to accelerate, that is the beginning of the approach to the sliding stop. And it is directly proportionate to how well that horse is going to do it. Well done stops have well approaches, well acceleration approaches. Yes. You won't see a bad acceleration have a great stop. And then there's more to it because the hesitation or the rollback or the backup. Each of those is distinctly different. The rollbacks are the hard ones.
Because there's so much there?
There's so much there, and horses are right and left like we are. So one is generally going
Always
to be a
will be.
little bit stronger than the other. And again, well, if you got the strong one first, your expectation's up there for the second one if he doesn't fulfill it. So are you being now too critical? You got to be careful with all of that.
And is that on a 5-judge system? Is that rollback happening right in front of you,
Chair forward is a lot.
or is it happening across the arena,
Correct.
far away from you?
That's why I like chair,
Chair
5.
5.
I love it. I love it.
Because
okay.
I never had it right. Yes, that's one of those.
Now I know why.
That's why I was thinking. I'm glad it came out. I was going to ask you later about that because
No,
the
that's-
chair 5. I was like, that. I think
Well, that's the
why he's
beauty of
there.
that one because you never have it right in your lap. Chair 4 and chair 3 on the up and down the sides, you have those stops and rollbacks right in your lap. And when you're looking like this on it, that's a lot to sort through. When you can sit back and see it, this is just me.
Yeah, yeah.
My experience, that's what I liked. So that because then I wouldn't miss it, and then my ability to focus on their legs at key spots, or the mouth, or the bridle, or the pole, whatever I was
hands, the
needing.
whatever,
Yeah,
yeah.
see, I could cut a rider off right at their hand because that's all I did. I watched their hand, their seat, legs. I got the horse. I got it all. And then
Yeah.
I could watch the legs when I knew I needed to. Coming out of rollbacks, slope departures, lead changes. You got to be on their legs. You have to, because you'll miss. A trot out of a rollback, that 1-2 is fast, and if your eyes aren't there, you will miss it.
Well, and I'm thinking about some of the 1 points and thinking back to, whether that's center chair coming around the circle, or, and this could happen in any, if you're on one wall and when they come around that circle on your wall, I could imagine that sometimes a judge would apply a 1-point penalty, be correct in applying that 1-point penalty. Another judge might miss the penalty, and the exhibitor would assume that the low judge is the tight one. They're the mean one. They're the one that's wrong, when really they actually caught the rule infraction.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then if,
When those horses, when they step on the gas pedal in the circles, they're going.
fine, yeah.
If you don't take your eyes and get down on those legs, you'll miss something. And a horse, because they're balanced, and it may not necessarily be bad, but it is a rule infraction because if they take that back foot, if they're loping and that back foot goes out for one stride, we don't have to know the why. We just have to say it did.
It did.
When it comes out, that's a 1-point penalty. Now I got more work. Did it influence the quality of the maneuver or not? Sometimes, especially in fast circles, a lot of times horses will step out, not influence the quality of the steering and the circle and the control, but they got a 1-point penalty.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And
Which
if
immediately
your
would be
eye's
a
not there,
1 point.
you missed it. And if you then you think, oh, did something happen? That's a
Or what
bad
about when the
thought.
audience goes, oh,
Yeah.
and you're like, what? I'm like, that's the worst. Ah.
You guys probably don't think about that as
As
judges.
as a judge, no, you don't listen to the audience.
It feels like, when
Right.
that happens.
Correct.
It's
I think
happened a
that as
couple
an-
times.
I think that as
like,
an announcer, when I hear that and I'm like looking down at my live score or something that I'm doing technological, I'm like, what did I miss? I'm like, Chelsea, it doesn't matter what you missed.
That's correct.
You can miss it all and it's okay as long as you say the score.
You're like,
right.
I'll just get that score right.
But that all goes to, so we've illustrated some of the complexity to the whole process.
That's what I was, thank you for summing it up. You want a job?
No.
No. So, you
I
know,
have one.
just coming back to everything, I mean, we started out with the question is why is there a spread in a multiple judge system? And we really broke it down into 3 categories. And I think the one that is most eye-opening for me and for those that I've spoken with is the complexity. The complexity between the decisions that you have to make, what you have to see, and how fast you have to do it. Mm-hmm. For each maneuver. Mm-hmm. And that's really where spreads can, happen.
In a healthy manner.
Yes, this is not a bad or someone missed something or anything. It is the complexity, and that's where there is the objectivity, but there is the subjectivity when it comes to the judging. And so I really feel, that we answered this question in such a great way. This is only one part of one tiny piece of the judging that we want to dive into. But, Brian, I just got to say thank you. I mean, your depth of knowledge and experience and enthusiasm is really something special.
You can tell he thinks the topic's boring, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, we could keep going. I know that thank you guys that are still with us. We have been, we could keep going, but we probably shouldn't.
But we won't.
We've got more to say in another time.
More to come.
Yep.
I would love to open up. We're going to round this one out today for the sake of time, but we're, as I mentioned in the introduction, going to have Brian/Dad as the panelist and often co-host for a lot of our upcoming topics, both on judging as well as some broader categories, controversial things going on in the industry, the application of certain aspects to these rules. And what I would love to hear from you guys in comments on this video are questions that you might have about other aspects of judging, applying the rules of judging system. And if Brian isn't the one for that, we'll go find the right experts or the right team of experts to talk about these topics, because that ultimately is what we want to do at Rainer Stop. So if you guys have questions about things that you're going through, things that you're dealing with at home, things that you're seeing in the reining community that you would like for us to discuss, please let us know in the comments. Shelly and I look at these daily.
And you can even send us a DM. Like if you want to keep it
Yes.
private, by all means, send us a DM either to our personal accounts or to Rainer Stop. We see them all. But your knowledge, I mean, this is, it's not even what you have questions about. Maybe there's something you want to learn more about. We are, focused right now on reining, but there are so many different aspects that are parts of that we are going to dive into. Relationships, nutrition, sun protection, foaling. I mean, there's so many topics. We are not going to go down to just one. So any ideas on things that you wish you could learn more about from different perspectives, not just one perspective. That's one thing that we're going to do here, is that we believe that lots of opinions are better than just one.
Speaking of lots of opinions, I'm looking now at our comments coming in. Yeah, the
five-judge
5-judge system.
We'll throw out the high and the low. And
Keep the middle.
We've got quite a few judges that are actually tuning in with us. Kathy, thank you. Kathy Luce mentioned that she learned a lot from you from teaching the judges school. But I've seen quite a few comments. Eric Laporte, Steve Ross is tuned in with us. And
Steve? Go ahead.
who's Steve?
No,
But if there are aspects to what we talked about today that you guys see differently on, would love to hear that too, or how it applies to you differently, or ways that you approach things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So please let us know, again, publicly in the comments or personally to any one of us individually. And Shelly, do you want to tell them a little bit about next steps with Rainer Stop, what's coming, and how they can get more involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, we are changing up Rainer Stop. The site right now, it's going to be changing very shortly, but the site right now is still the good old site for buying and selling horses. What I want to do right now is we added a separate bar right under the header, and that is an email capture. So when we launch this, we are going to have a founding members launch, and that founding members is going to not only take part in an actual price advantage, but what they are more going to be a part of is this founding member group is going to be our sounding board. We are going to look to you to help us create Rainer Stop, create this community that is going to serve all of us. you know, the more education that we have, the more knowledge that we have as consumers, as exhibitors, spectators, breeders, reining enthusiasts, the more that we are going to be better as an industry. So what I would ask is, if you are interested in learning more, because the site is going to be launching very soon, jump over to Rainer Stop right now. Throw in your email address, just your email address. There's no commitment or anything necessary there. And or you can just shoot us a DM with your email as well if you prefer that. We'll get you in the system, make sure that when we do launch, that you are going to be first to know. Our founding member launch, it is going to be a short-term launch, so you do want to be a part of that email community, because you'll be the first to know. And once it's closed, guys. Did I miss anything?
No, no, you didn't. It's all great. I'm so excited about some of the topics we have planned. I just
confirmed another one today.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to have some great ones.
It's going to be, you guys, and this is, I mean, again, I just can't say it enough. We hear you.
Oh, we hear you.
We hear you at the horse shows. We hear you in your DMs. We hear you on the comments. In the forums. We hear you, and we are going to bring that knowledge to you. And again, this isn't what Rainer Stop says. This isn't what Brian says, and we're trying to persuade anything. We are here to educate and inform. And
ultimately, that puts, in my opinion, the power back in your hands, right? Like, I have, you know, these past few months and really the past year and a half, we've seen major shifts and changes in the horse community, the competition community, the reining communities. COVID certainly changed a lot. We're seeing a lot of things changing show side. And ultimately, the more each one of us are educated, the more we can have an opportunity to make changes that we actually want to see changes for. And so there's good stuff coming.
Yep. And, I mean, I just love learning from other people. That's the thing is, you know, the more perspectives we can get, the more we can grow.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. Please make sure that you follow us on our social media outlets, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube too. Go ahead and subscribe over there. We will be using that in a new way. But make sure that you are a part of that. Jump on our email list, and we will see you guys next week.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah. Sounds good, guys. Have a great one.